Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, every safety pro knows is crucial, but it can be, honestly, a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
OSHA's injury and illness recording criteria, figuring which cases need to be logged can feel like navigating a maze, right? But we're here to help you find your way. And a big thanks to our friends at Safety One Source for making this deep dive possible.
Absolutely. And they're the perfect partner for this, They really get the challenges safety professionals face. So we're going to use their expertise, obviously, along with guidance, straight from OSHA, of course, to break down these requirements so you can walk away feeling confident about what needs to be recorded. And, most importantly, why.
I love that. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about really understanding the reasoning behind the rules.
Right.
So to guide us, today we've got excerpts from OSHA's website, specifically section 1904.4, which, lays out all the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, and that section can seem pretty dense, at first glance, which is why having those insights from Safety One Source is so valuable. They've got a knack for, distilling complex information, into practical, easy-to-understand advice.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. OSHA starts off by saying, if your company is required to keep records, every fatality, injury, and illness needs to be logged. But there's a catch. It has to meet 3 specific criteria. It's not just about, automatically recording everything that happens.
Right, and this is where it gets interesting. Those criteria are, 1, the incident must be work-related. 2, it needs to be a new case. And 3, it must meet at least one of the general recording criteria.
Wait, hold on. Back up for a second. General recording criteria.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
Oh, good catch. It's easy to get lost in the jargon. General recording criteria basically means the case is serious enough to, warrant OSHA's attention. This could include things like needing medical treatment, beyond first aid, missing work, or having restricted work duties. OSHA wants you to be tracking those significant cases.
So it's about focusing on the incidents that have a real impact on employees' health and well-being. Makes sense.
Exactly. It's all about identifying those incidents. That could indicate a bigger problem in the workplace and helping you, the safety professional, prevent them from happening again.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Right.
But OSHA doesn't just give us this list of criteria and then leave us to fend for ourselves, right?
Absolutely not. They provide some honestly really helpful resources to guide us through the process. Think of it like they've given us a toolkit to make sure we're getting this right.
Okay, I like where this is going. What's in the toolkit?
Well, first, they break down each criterion into its own separate section within the regulations. So if you're unsure about work-relatedness, for example, you dive into section 1904.5. Need to determine if it's a new case. Section 1904.6 is your go-to. And for those general recording criteria we just talked about, that's all covered in 1904.7. It's all very organized, easy to navigate.
Yeah. You know what? I used to find all these different sections really confusing, but now that you explain it, it actually sounds pretty user-friendly.
It is, once you understand the logic behind it. But OSHA also knows that sometimes, even with clear guidelines, you might need a bit more help visualizing the process. That's where their super helpful decision tree flowchart comes in.
Yes, the flowchart.
Yeah.
It could be a bit intimidating at first glance, all those boxes and arrows. But I've heard people say it's actually really helpful once you get the hang of it.
Exactly. And that's something Safety One Source really emphasizes in their training materials. They understand that visual aids can be a game changer when it comes to, learning and applying complex information.
Okay, so tell me more about this flowchart. How does it work exactly?
Well, it walks you through each step of the decision-making process, starting with a very basic question.
Yeah.
Did the employee experience an injury or illness? Based on your answer, you follow the branches of the tree, answering additional questions along the way, until you reach a final determination. Is this case recordable or not? It's a really effective way to break down, a complex process into manageable steps.
Like how you called it a decision-making process, because that's what it really is, right? We're not just blindly recording incidents. We're gathering information and using this flowchart to make informed decisions about which cases meet those specific criteria.
You got it. And the beauty of the flowchart is that it doesn't just help you decide on new cases. It also prompts you to review and potentially update your existing records. So it's a valuable tool for maintaining accuracy and consistency in your, record-keeping practices.
That's a really important point. It's not just a one-time thing. As we gather more information about an incident, our understanding of it might evolve. And the flowchart guides us through those adjustments.
Precisely. And I think that highlights the importance of having reliable resources to turn to when those, tricky situations arise. That's where the expertise of a group like Safety One Source can really come in handy. They can help you navigate those gray areas and make sure you're applying the criteria correctly.
It sounds like they're a great resource for safety professionals who want to stay on top of their game and make sure they're protecting, both their employees and their companies.
Absolutely. They're a real champion for workplace safety. And their practical approach to training and education is something that I think really resonates with a lot of people in the field.
So we've talked about the 3 core criteria: the helpful way OSHA organizes the regulations, and that all-important decision tree flowchart. What stands out to you, Evry, as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive?
What strikes me is we often talk about these criteria in isolation, but they're actually all interconnected. You can't just memorize the definitions, right? You have to be able to apply them to, real life scenarios in your workplace.
That's so true. It's one thing to read about work-relatedness in a textbook, but it's another thing entirely to determine whether, say, a slip and fall in the company parking lot actually meets that criterion.
Right, and that's where things can get a bit tricky. Take that parking lot example. Was the employee on their way into work, leaving after their shift? Was there ice on the ground that the company hadn't cleared? All those details matter when you're trying to determine if the incident is truly work-related.
So it's like detective work almost. You have to gather all the clues before you can solve the case. And just like a detective, you need to have the right tools to do your job effectively.
Absolutely. And that's why the decision tree flowchart can be so valuable. It forces you to think through each step logically and consider all the relevant factors. But even with the flowchart, there will be times when you need to rely on your own judgment and experience.
That makes sense. Yeah. No flowchart can account for every possible scenario. But speaking of gathering information, what are some practical tips for making sure we're collecting all the details we need? What should we be doing on the ground, so to speak, to make sure we're prepared to make those informed decisions?
Well, first and foremost, a thorough investigation is key. And I don't just mean talking to the employee involved. You need to talk to any witnesses. Review security footage if available. Inspect the area where the incident occurred. And gather any other relevant documentation.
Wow, it sounds like a full-blown investigation. But I guess that just highlights how seriously we need to take this process.
Exactly. Remember, we're not just filling out paperwork here. We're trying to identify hazards, understand why incidents happen, and ultimately prevent them from happening again. And the more information you have, the better equipped you'll be to do that effectively.
So it's not just about determining whether an incident is recordable or not. It's about using that information to improve safety for everyone.
Precisely. Think of it this way. Every incident, even a minor one, is an opportunity to learn and improve by conducting thorough investigations and accurately recording our findings. We can start to identify trends, see where the risks are, and implement, targeted interventions.
So it's about being proactive, not just reactive. I like that. But I imagine there are times when this whole process can feel a bit overwhelming, especially for safety professionals who are already juggling a million things.
Oh, absolutely. It's a lot to keep track of, especially when you're dealing with multiple incidents and trying to stay on top of all the latest OSHA updates. That's why it's so important to have resources you can rely on, like the training and support materials provided by Safety One Source.
Yeah, they really seem to understand the challenges we face in the field. They don't just throw a bunch of regulations at you. They break things down into, manageable chunks and give you practical strategies you can actually use.
Right. And they do a great job of emphasizing the why behind the rules, which I think is so important. When you understand why you're doing something, it's much easier to stay motivated and engaged.
I used to find this whole record-keeping process kind of tedious, like I was just going through the motions. But once I started to see the bigger picture, how it all connected to creating a safer workplace, it really changed my perspective.
That's great to hear. It's easy to get bogged down in the details, but it's so important to remember that we're doing this for a reason. We're protecting people's lives and livelihoods.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of thorough investigations, the value of the decision tree flowchart, and the need to have reliable resources to turn to when things get complicated. But there's one more crucial element we need to discuss, and it's something that Safety One Source is really passionate about. We can't forget about, the human side of this whole process.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we're not just dealing with data points and regulations. We're dealing with real people who've experienced something that's, potentially impacted their health and well-being.
And I think that's something Safety One Source does a really great job of emphasizing.
Yeah.
in their training. They're all about approaching safety with empathy and understanding.
That's right. They recognize that how we handle these situations can have a huge impact on the injured or ill employee's recovery and their, overall trust in the company.
So how can we, as safety professionals, make sure we're approaching this process in a way that is both thorough and compassionate?
Well, communication is key. Keep employees informed every step of the way. Explain why you're asking certain questions, what the recording criteria are, and what the, potential outcomes might be. Transparency can go a long way in building trust and alleviating any fears or anxieties they may have.
It's about treating them like human beings, not just case numbers.
Exactly. And it's not just about providing information. It's about actively listening to their concerns, answering their questions honestly, and offering support and resources. Let them know that you're there for them, not just to investigate the incident, but to help them, through the recovery process.
I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the technical aspects of safety that we forget about the human element. It's a good reminder that our job is ultimately about protecting people.
Well said. And when you approach safety from a place of, empathy and understanding, it not only benefits the individual employee, but it also helps create a stronger safety culture within the entire organization.
So to recap, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the 3 key criteria for recording work-related injuries and illnesses, the importance of, thorough investigations, the value of the decision tree flowchart, and of course, the crucial human element. That should always be at the forefront of our minds.
And we have to give a big shout out to Safety One Source for their dedication to making workplace safety more accessible and understandable for everyone.
They really are a fantastic resource for safety professionals at all levels.
Couldn't agree more.
So for all of you safety champions out there, remember, staying informed, proactive, and compassionate is the best way to protect both your employees and your business. And don't be afraid to, lean on those valuable resources like Safety One Source to help you navigate the complexities of OSHA's regulations.
Well said. It's all about working together to create a safer and healthier work environment for everyone.
Until next time, happy diving.
And stay safe out there.
Now for a little something to ponder, how can you use this information to improve communication and foster a more supportive safety culture in your own workplace? Something to think about. Until we meet again.